Right, recording has started. Andrew, what was your question again?
Well, being a former British colony, English tends to be the language of business here, but we do accommodate clients in a variety of languages.
I think in terms of English, spoken English, I think people that are 60 years old and below in Malaysia, I think maybe 90% of us, or even more than 90% of us speak English, because it has been in the curriculum since that time, you know, when they're coming of age. Of course, when you're talking about the 80 years old, 90 years old people in Malaysia, they still kind of speak their mother tongue, which is either Malay, Mandarin, Tamil. But when it comes to the younger generation, or the relatively younger generation, the boomers, the baby boomers generation, I think pretty much everybody speaks English here. So and basically people that are going to the websites to seek care, whether it's home care or institutionalized care, they are generally in the 60 years old plus minus category, because they have parents that are in their 80s and 90s. And so kind of the English website kind of serves its purpose. But we do have, for example, because in Malaysia, we are also pretty multiracial. The three main ethnic groups are the Malays, the Chinese, and the Indians. So when it comes to customers, the customer service part of the care advisory part, we do provide that in three different languages. So as long as you get through to us on one of our phone lines or on our WhatsApp, we can interact with you with whichever languages you prefer. That's, I think, what's going on here. Andrew?
You answered it quite well. I leave it to Jennifer to ask questions.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of like address the question that you said just now, like language barrier. We do face this with in the care space in Malaysia as well, because like I mentioned, those in their 80s and 90s, many of them, they just speak their native language. They don't speak English. They don't speak anything else. Many of our caregivers are either Filipinos, which primarily speaks English and Tagalog, and also local Malay caregivers, which primarily speaks Malay and English. So we do have this language barrier issue that is going on in Malaysia as well. And I think, I don't know, I'm hoping that we can kind of get some instant translation application or device in the future to kind of address this issue. I'm just hoping technology could catch up faster. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Something I was curious about, I know I saw your LinkedIn post the other day about your training program. So I was hoping you could elaborate on that and what you offer, whether it's in person, online, kind of going over briefly what you offer to new caregivers, whether they're experienced or non-experienced, how you go about onboarding new caregivers and the training that they go through.
Yeah, I think the care or this whole system in the US is much more mature than we have in Malaysia. Okay. We do not really have a caregiver as a professional, as a profession in Malaysia. So this is something pretty new. In Malaysia, they're either untrained caregivers or they're nurses. So this in between kind of like care assistant or patient care assistants or caregivers or professional caregivers, this category kind of doesn't exist until maybe the past decade or so. So about 10, 15 years ago, this began to emerge. And we realized that there are actually many people that they are not interested to take up a 3 years nursing diploma or 4, and on top of that, another 3 years of a degree to become a nurse. They would much rather just do the kind of like the activities of daily living part, the support part. And this is where our training program comes in. So this program is basically a 1 month theory lesson online. And once they pass the theory lesson, they can be attached to any one of our nursing homes or any one of our partners in Malaysia, all over Malaysia, to do their 2 months practical rotation. And during their practical rotation, they will be assessed based on their skills and their knowledge. And if they qualify, we will, because of the labor shortage issue, we almost definitely 100% can guarantee them a job placement, whether it's with us or with any of our partners. So this professional caregiving program in Malaysia is pretty new. We have basically developed the syllabus ourselves with references to syllabus from other more developed countries like the US, Japan, even taking some references from Singapore as well, because that's like closest to us culturally, and both the social norms that are practiced. So we are kind of like Malaysia is still like, I think, maybe a couple of generations behind developed countries in terms of the caregiving space. So we are kind of like, and with Andrew's help, we're kind of like trying to stimulate the whole industry, trying to move things forward by introducing, different programs, different trainings to hopefully catch up with the developed countries soon enough.
Yeah, one of the things to keep in mind about this industry, and when I say this, I'm talking about nursing homes, assisted living, home care, is that just a few years ago, this was a very disorganized, not very professional industry. It was basically a bunch of small mom and pop companies. So when we started Pillar Home Care and Jasper Lodge Nursing Homes, one of our goals was to bring professionalism to the industry. And a big part of that was to create training programs. Here in Malaysia, for a long time, people equated maids with caregivers. Oh, I need a maid to take care of my grandmother. Well, we believe, and I'm sure you know, that being a caregiver is much different than being a maid. Caregivers focus on the person as opposed to a maid that focuses basically on cleaning the house. So it's been an education process over the last 4 or 5 years to help people understand what caregiving and home care and nursing home care is really all about.
And you talked about trying to train your caregivers to kind of be their own employers, right? Like being their own, becoming an entrepreneur, basically. And I've seen a lot of CEOs and more like higher up executives here in the United States display a lot of distrust in employees. Like they're like, we wouldn't even want them in the office, much less seeing them start their own businesses, which I think is so discouraging because I feel like a lot of people have the potential if they found someone that empowered them or encouraged them in some form.
Right.
So how have you found that to be successful in your model?
Well, it's interesting because I come out of a US corporate world where I worked for big companies, and honestly, I've soured on big companies over the last few years because I don't think they necessarily have their employees' best interests at heart. You take a job, you're there to serve the employer, and the employer really isn't there to help you develop your career, only in the sense of helping you do your job better. So here in Southeast Asia in particular, I think there's a different culture where it's much more entrepreneurial. And we believe, or at least I believe, that caregivers and other healthcare professionals who work independently want to have more opportunities to grow. But if you're attached to an agency or a company, it's hard to do that. So we're trying to develop a culture and support caregivers who want to be their own, we call it micro entrepreneurs. Maybe now they're just a caregiver earning a salary, but they want to have a network of their own caregivers. They want to build their own businesses. And that's been kind of the philosophy that we've been promoting in the last couple of years, and why we're developing this platform called Case, which is designed to support care providers such as caregivers and physiotherapists and nurses and all of them. So I think it's culturally very different here than maybe in the West. Do you have anything to add to that, Dr. Lin?
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter is most local caregivers in Malaysia, they kind of prefer to have more flexible timing. So if you're attached to an agency, basically you have to take cases based on the assignment of the agencies. But if you are kind of like working as a micro entrepreneur, which is doing freelance caregiving, you can kind of fix your own schedule, set your own timing, set your own goals. So in that way, we kind of do not have to, as the corporate side of things, we kind of do not have to micromanage them. Our role is more to support them to be successful as caregivers, or to take up a profession or a career in caregiving. And should they need any support, they need any help, they need any further training, development, we are here to provide that for them, and we're here to grow together with them. I think that is kind of like the culture and the tone that we're setting in our company as compared to, typical caregiving agencies or maid agencies.
Got it. So like kind of dissimilar to a Home Instead, for example, like a large conglomerate now owned by Honor, like they were a big platform and they kind of have this tech-based model, and they have the physical in-home care model, but they have that agency life. So you're having that, they always say flexible schedule, make your own hours, but it's really based on what they have in terms of clients. So seeing that these freelance caregivers, I love that term because you never hear that around here. They just say like informal or private hired caregivers, which kind of cringes me, honestly, because a lot of people in the United States, at least, are out here to scam people.
Oh yeah,
Well,
we get quite a fair bit of that as well, Andrew.
yeah, I was going to say the thing about the model with Honor and Home Instead, what I think they tried to create sort of an independent care model early on, but I think they realized it was very difficult. And as you know, there are different laws in every state in the US about providing care at home and all of that. So it's very hard to scale the business in the US compared to Malaysia. So what Honor has had to do and others have had to do is they've had to acquire the companies in order to grow.
Right.
Here, there's less regulations. That may change over time, but they've been talking about changing the regulations and improving regulations for many years here and throughout Asia, and it still hasn't really happened. But we're trying to take advantage of opportunities caregivers want to be independent and to grow their own businesses, which would be very hard to do in the US given the regulatory climate and given the dominance of a few companies in the US.
Got it. So when you have a caregiver that's trying to start with your agency, how do you go about doing that in terms of matching them with clients? Since they have their own schedules, how do you go about matching those needs?
Okay, I'm going to take this question. If it's based on the agency model, the more traditional agency model, the job kind of comes in through the marketing arm of the agency, and then it goes up to a bulletin board, and caregivers can kind of pick and choose what kind of jobs they're looking for, and is it within their vicinity? Is this something that they can undertake? So this is more kind of like a traditional model that the care services are kind of rendered or provided through agencies. But what we're trying to do now is kind of like let the caregivers dictate their own terms. So if they create a profile with us, they can kind of set what kind of services that they're interested to provide. So some of them may be more skilled, prefer to kind of like go towards the skilled caregiving part, caring for someone with tube feeding, that needs dressing, that needs all sorts of more complex care, care services or activities. And some of them, maybe they prefer kind of like focusing more on the companionship, focusing more on the activities of daily living. We kind of do not dictate what services that they want to provide. And we don't even dictate what kind of rates they want to collect as well. So it's fully up to them to decide what are their working hours, what their service areas, what kind of services that they want to provide through the platform, what kind of prices they want to charge. It's all fully up to the caregivers. Of course, what we do is we kind of like vet through. If you claim that you are a skilled caregiver, we want to kind of see your qualifications. We want to see your experience. We want to see some testimonies, some references that proves to us that you are kind of qualified for that for the skilled caregiver title. If the person coming in is already a nurse, he or she just has to present the diploma or the degree, and then they are automatically qualified. For those that just coming on board as companions, we do not have such strict requirements from them, because companions generally is a less skill required job as compared to a skilled caregiver. So that's as a platform or as a kind of marketplace, the issue has always been the whole leakage thing. That means if once our kind of like our employers or our clients engage one of our caregivers, and then they go off the platform, they have private arrangements with the caregivers and trying to bypass this. So on that front, what we do is we kind of do not collect a so-called agency fee or middleman's fee from them. We allow them to interact. They can do the payment directly, not through our platform. But as a platform, what we offer to them is sort of like an escrow service. So if you pay the money directly to the caregiver and the person doesn't show up, that's not our responsibility. But if you kind of pay through us, we hold the money. Once the job or the service is completed, then only we will, without complaints, then we will release the funds to the caregiver or the care provider. So in this model, we kind of collect a transaction fee for the escrow service that we're providing. And in terms of the subscription fee, because it's like a small, I would say, electronic medical record, or maybe a bit of like a business tool for the caregiver. So we do charge them a minimal fee every month to use the the app or the tool, the business tool that we provide for them. And we also do, for example, for those that wants us to help market their profile, we kind of also charge a little bit more on that front as well. So that's how we kind of monetize the platform, the application that we're coming up with. Andrew?
No, that's good. You covered it well.
All right.
Love it. And do you have like additional services that caregivers can take advantage of, like let's say care management, for example? Like if someone, let's say, is just a caregiver and they do like daily tasks and stuff, but their client may need more, do they reach out to you and get access to those auxiliary services, or how do they get connected?
I think in general, if they need any support, like I said, our role is here to support them with any additional services they might need. So if they might not be the right person to kind of like provide the, like for example, if it's a caregiver at home that kind of do the basic activities of daily living, and he or she may not have the skills to do wound feeding tube, rouse tube change, for example. And when they need this service, they can always reach out to us and we can say, okay, let us recommend a nurse to you, whether it's our in-house team or whether it's one of our micro entrepreneurs, freelancers, to go in and kind of handle that part. So caregiving is like a team effort. It's not like one person can do everything. Sometimes they might need a doctor to go in as well. Sometimes they might need a therapist to go in. So we have started with the core caregiving services, and we are slowly expanding to different categories of support and care and development as we go along. I think that's the summary of what we're doing. Did I miss anything out, Andrew?
No, I think you covered it well.
Perfect. This is great. What are some other differences you think that would be important for me to include in the article when explaining the differences between here and Malaysia?
I think one of the things that I observed, which is a very glaring difference, is the amount of support when it comes to the regulators and the authority. Now in Malaysia, because this is such a new industry, it's such a raw industry, the regulators and authorities haven't kind of like caught up with the whole scene and the demand. And pretty much most of our care services in Malaysia are paid out of pocket. We do not have any insurance coverage for long-term care. We don't have any insurance coverage for nursing homes or in-home caregiving services. So it's pretty much, I would say maybe 95% of most of our clients are all out-of-pocket payers. And because there are no regulatory framework, there's no guidelines or law even to dictate that, or government policies to dictate that, all these old people kind of need some support and help to in terms of besides the services, also their financial needs as well. And I think that has been a glaring issue in Malaysia that has not been addressed as compared to more developed nations like the US or Japan or Australia, whereby they have their Medicare programs, their kind of retirement programs or social security programs that covers the some of the care needs that they might have when they are aging or when they're old or when they need further services. In Malaysia, I think we are at least maybe 5 to 10 years behind when it comes to a proper regulatory framework in terms of insurance coverage. I think we need a little bit of time to develop that. And we are kind of like in the trailblazing space, Andrew bringing his expertise from a more developed nation, and we are kind of working together to spearhead and to kind of create the awareness and to kind of introduce or bring awareness to such policies that might benefit the aging population in Malaysia.
Part of it too is that in Asia generally, except maybe for Japan, for many years, countries like Vietnam and maybe to some extent Malaysia were very young populations. So the governments didn't really focus on senior citizens or an aging population, but that's changing now. The population is aging here. It's aging in other countries in the region. So I think the focus will probably increase over time here, but for a long time, aging issues just wasn't much of an issue in a lot of these countries until fairly recently.
Yeah, and probably another difference to point out is the clear classification or the clear distinction between caregiver roles in the US or in more developed nations as compared to Malaysia. I think Andrew mentioned just now, in Malaysia, we kind of hire a domestic helper and kind of expect he or she to do everything, clean, cook, take care of the old person that is bedridden, and walk the dogs, like kind of do everything. But I think that's not really a very efficient way of going about caregiving, because a human being just it's not supposed to, or you can do all these things well if you're required to. So I think the ability to kind of distinguish, not just for the authorities or for the industry people, also for the general public, to sort of distinguish between the roles of caregivers as compared to domestic helpers or maids or nurses, is something that is still sort of lagging behind in Malaysia. And we are, I think, also trying to create a lot of awareness on that front as well. But we've seen improvements, definitely, right, Andrew, over the 5 years that we've been in business. We've definitely seen some changes over time. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, when I first started about 5 years ago here, people really weren't even talking about being a caregiver. They were talking about maids or domestic help, as Dr. Lim said. But now you're hearing in the vernacular more about caregiving, activities of daily living. We've done a number of blog articles and Facebook posts on the differences between caregivers and maids. So people are finally starting to understand a little better about what it means to care for a person as opposed to being a maid. So we've definitely seen changes in the last few years here.
I was trying to think of that question I had. So when it comes to most of it being private pay, do you see that there is a disparity? Like, are the people that are getting care the vast wealthy people of the country? Because like obviously in the United States, with the programs that we have, it seems like either if you're insanely poor or insanely rich, you're getting care, but it's that lofty middle that's really struggling because the private pay rates are so high. Do you notice that too?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much similar in Malaysia. Most of our clients, I would say, belong to the that takes private in-home caregiving services, kind of like in the affluent category. So maybe the T20 category, and those that are in the B40 category kind of like have government aid and support, which leaves the M40, the most underserved population, and because they do not qualify for any government programs, and it's difficult for them to afford the kind of rates. So it's more often than not like, and I think maybe another difference between here and the US is, I think we kind of have more kids. Like my parents' generation have more children, I think, so they have more siblings. So either one of them will have to resign from their jobs, kind of take up a full-time informal caregiving kind of role for the old person, or everybody kind of have to chip in money and to bridge the gap, or to kind of like afford these kind of caregiving services. So if this does not change, and because my generation, we definitely have much less children as compared to much fewer children as compared to our previous generations, and if we do not have the financial kind of like the coverage or insurance coverage, I think many of us are going to be struggling in the future caring for our elderly. So this is a trend that I foresee, and that's why we are pushing very hard to kind of like change policy or introduce or impact some changes in the policies in Malaysia.
Well, I think it's interesting how like the different aging and different populations is really starting to affect countries now. Like I saw a TikTok yesterday that was showing a woman in her story of how she gave birth in Korea and how it's different. And with Korea, I guess they're giving out a lot of benefits for women who are getting pregnant, because there are disproportionate amount of older adults versus younger people. So they're trying to encourage people to have children and give them a lot of incentives to do so that they continue to have them, and that they can have continuing generations and not to have such an age disparity. So I think it's definitely really interesting to see how countries are coming up with different plans and ideas of how to get there to be more people, or countries that are giving more plans. Like I think Singapore just came out with a new aging plan to help make things more accessible for age. And like, how are the houses in Malaysia? Are they age friendly? Because I know most of the United States are not. and aren't built that way or aren't built sustainably to sustain someone their lifetime as they age. So I was curious about that.
Well, from an expat's perspective, I would say it's very similar here to the U.S. I don't think a lot of people are focusing on age-friendly homes. You're seeing some of it, but very small. I mean, I think here we're still at the point where we're still working on, access for people who are in wheelchairs or disabled to get into public spaces or supermarkets or malls. I mean, it's getting better certainly, but I think like many countries, we're still fairly behind in terms of, age accessible homes here in Malaysia.
Yeah, yeah. As I was telling a friend, I said when we designed the society, I don't know about other countries, but when we designed the societies in Malaysia, we kind of forgot that all of us are going to age sometime or another. So when we designed the whole place, the cities, the public transportation, the housing systems, but we kind of forgot that everyone eventually gets old, and therefore, I personally think that there aren't enough emphasis put on making things either disabled friendly or elderly friendly. So these are some of the challenges I see, even in the town, in terms of the experts when it comes to town planning or architects. I think right now we are beginning to see that they have starting to, I would say, awaken to the fact that most of our infrastructures are not elderly friendly and not wheelchair friendly. And many more developers are kind of like jumping into the space and wanting to create these kind of facilities that and looking at it as either retirement friendly, elderly friendly, or multi-generational kind of design and architecture to support the as you said, the sustainable aging or living for the population. Many of them I know are still doing it out as a gimmick because they want to sell properties, but we do see some genuine developers that are very concerned, and their designs are very well thought out. Their layouts are very well thought out, and it's an encouraging sign, I guess. It's not happening as fast as we would like to, but I think we definitely got to start somewhere, right, Andrew?
But here, even those few developers who are developing sort of retirement communities or some assisted living, it's still quite unaffordable for most people.
Yeah. So again, we are talking about the affluent, the T20 population that could afford this kind of services because it's kind of all paid out of pocket.
And how would you say the general health of the Malaysian people are? Like, obviously, in the United States, we are notorious for our McDonald's and ease of access to unhealthy and processed foods. And having gone to Europe, I was just like, oh my God, no processed sugars, no artificial flavorings. Coke just tasted different and so much better there. I was curious, like, are people in Malaysia generally healthier? Are they having a longer health span?
Well, let me tell you one thing from my American perspective, living here in Malaysia. I can walk across the street from my apartment building into a huge mall. And if I go into the food section, it's no different than being in America.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rows and rows of American and local fast food, which isn't much different than American fast food. So obviously there are healthy options here. And maybe Dr. Lin can comment on the sort of the general health of the population compared to other countries in the US.
I think in terms of the health issues, I think in Malaysia, I would say we are one of the worst performing countries in Southeast Asia. The fact that about half our adult population are overweight. So this is not too dissimilar to what's going on in the US. And
diabetes is very high too, right?
1 in 7 adults are diabetic in Malaysia as well. I would attribute that to basically our dietary food intake, the lack of awareness when it comes to healthy living, healthy eating. I think we still pretty much we're not there yet, definitely, and that is actually a big contributor to a lot of elderly related diseases or chronic diseases that eventually would end up will render them requiring a caregiver in the future. So definitely, I think that is a place to start when it comes to health awareness. I think in terms of prevention, in terms of health screening, I think these are all still it's we're not there yet, definitely, in terms of all these issues that we are facing. But there are many, whether it's government efforts or private efforts to create awareness, bring more attention to health screening. We do a fair bit of health education ourselves as well. And hopefully that could help lessen the disease burden that we are seeing in Malaysia, whether it's obesity or diabetes. So these are the issues that we are kind of like facing right now. And it's a public health crisis, definitely, in Malaysia.
Got it. And more toward your home care business side, how many like caregivers do you have, and about how many clients are you caring for? I was just curious.
Well, we have a pretty big network. We have hundreds of caregivers in our network, but obviously all of them aren't working all the time. So, we take care of up to a couple hundred clients every month, basically. Did I get that right, Dr. Lim?
Yeah. A couple of hundred in the private home care front and a couple of hundred in our nursing homes. So yeah, 350 to 400 around that range every month.
Perfect. Is there anything else you think I should know? Those were the questions I had on hand, but I wasn't sure if there's anything that you feel I would be better off knowing or that would be good for the article.
Well, I guess maybe if your audience are in the US and if there are people interested in the caregiving space, in the elderly care space in Southeast Asia, which is kind of like we are kind of like at the beginning of the boom of the industry. And it's really a great opportunity to get into this business now. If they are investors or if they are entrepreneurs that are interested to kind of get into the space, I think it's a good opportunity to explore it at this point, because in another 5 years or 10 years, it's going to be a very mature industry, and the barrier of entry could be very high back then. And regulations may make it harder for people to come into the space. So I think it's a great opportunity for American investors, entrepreneurs to explore this whole care and aging space in Southeast Asia. I think it's going to be a very big industry as well in terms of opportunity wise. So yeah, that would be one of the messages I would like to send to your audience.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it well. And obviously, as you're writing the article, if you want to check with me on any specific facts, just send me an email and I'll happy to answer really quickly. But yeah, as Dr. Lim said, I think there's a great opportunity here for entrepreneurs from other countries, the US, that want to work with us, because it is a huge market throughout Asia, not just in Malaysia. And the demand for caregiving, for nursing homes, is just growing exponentially every year. So this is a very, I think, untapped market right now. And the fact that we were able to build two of the leading businesses in this space in 4 years or so is pretty remarkable. It means there's still a lot of opportunity available, because it's hard to handle all of the demand that's out there, honestly.
Yeah, I think you've covered everything well. I think there's nothing else I would like to add on my side. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, if you ever need any like marketing or operational assistance, I'm happy to help out if you ever need.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting, because we are constantly looking for collaborators and strategic partners. So I think, yeah, let's keep in touch, and who knows, we might have opportunities in the future to work together again.
Sure, you got it.
Yeah. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it. And Dr. Lim, send me the recording and I'll send it on to her.
I will. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And
thank you.
Is it okay we upload this conversation up to our page as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, great. Just wanted to be sure. All right.
Thank you. Have a good day. Good evening.
You have a good evening, Jennifer.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Bye. Take care, people. Bye.